And we're ready.
We're ready. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to you. The time is now just around 6:14. A very good evening to you and welcome to yet another in a series of Sunday roasts brought to you under the kind auspices of the Democratic Labour Party. I'm Steve Blackett, and I'll be your moderator for this evening's program. On this particular segment of the roast, we are discussing the tourism industry, entitled Rescuing Tourism. I have with me for this edition of the roast, party leader and spokesperson on finance, Verla de Peiza, Damien Griffith, the General Secretary and the spokesperson on tourism, and former Minister of Tourism in Barbados between the years 2008 and 2018, and the former Member of Parliament, Richard Seeley. Welcome, party leader, and comrades. As I said before, this evening, we will be focusing on tourism. Over the years, tourism in Barbados has replaced agriculture to be become the main engine of economic growth, acting as a catalyst for growth in other key sectors. This sector is of critical importance to Barbados' economy, particularly as it contributes significantly to foreign exchange earnings, GDP, and employment. Tourism generates almost 40% of the country's gross domestic product. It is against that background, clearly showing the importance of this key economic engine, that we will commence this evening with the opening statements from our panelists, starting first with the party leader, Verla de Peiza, followed by Damien Griffith, and then Richard Seeley. Party leader.
Good evening. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to all of our viewers for your patience as we dealt with a technical glitch. The tourism industry has been the bedrock of the Barbadian economy ever since we ceded that responsibility away from sugar. In light of the fact that we have not spent any time in recent years in any serious way courting alternate streams of revenue, tourism remains that major player. It has taken a significant hit because of COVID, but what we have found is that tourism is not dead. Tourism is just simply going to be different. So what we wanted to do this evening was to have an open discussion on how we view tourism, its place in the Barbados economy, how it can be repositioned post-COVID, and get that conversation started, I beg your pardon, about policy initiatives going forward that would allow tourism, first of all, to regenerate itself and its revenues, but also to be a player alongside of other revenue streams, which traditionally have depended on tourism for at least one part of its income, but also needs to be fostered and monitored to the point of self-sufficiency as well. So we want to have a wide-ranging and far-reaching discussion on where we can take tourism and how it can be positioned and repositioned in a brand new Barbados in a wholly different world, and looking at how we get into the psyche of that new tourist who will be looking at completely different considerations given the realities that have been visited on us in the last year and a half. We need to be understanding and appreciating what it looks like now globally and how we fit into that equation, and more importantly, how we can stand out in this new and exciting world that COVID has presented to us.
Thank you very much, party leader. Damien?
Hi, good evening, Steve, and to the other panelists. I think the president has shaped clearly where we want to go with the response to tourism, I think my role now as a spokesperson on tourism is to look at the realities that we are facing on the ground. And our policies have heavily been impacted by the reality of COVID. We're sitting with a former and very successful tourism minister in Richard Seeley, who had a very clear path while he was there. Unfortunately, the new realities that we face have blown much of that work and that bedding out of the way, because we would have been able in the past to expand routes, get more airlift in, and basically increase the product that we were able to offer and the access to that product. Now, COVID has changed that. I don't believe that the powers that be currently have fully come to grips with the level of the change, because we see them speaking still of short-term visitors in the old manner, when we know that the reality is that if we don't do proper quarantine protocols, you can't keep the island safe from the ravages of COVID. And therefore, that it's important that COVID be the factor to help assist everyone, that we use this situation to be the factor to get everyone into a newer environment. And with that, what we have to do is to create the space in which we can be the new type of product that is necessary. That means attracting longer stayed visitors in the short term and building the product that we need for the future. Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you very much, Damien. Comrade Richard. You need to unmute.
Yes, done. Yes, thank you very much, Steve, and greetings to the panelists, and of course to those who are tuned in on cyberspace. And let me, of course, thank the General Secretary and the Executive for the invitation to participate in this effort. And of course, it's great to be here. Clearly, what is happening in tourism is unprecedented. I mean, we've never actually seen what's going on in tourism happen before. We always knew that tourism was a fickle sector. We knew it had a soft underbelly. And many of the things that we're talking about doing now are things that we have been discussing for some time. I mean, you would have to be living under a rock not to know that we've been speaking about diversification. We've been speaking about intersectoral linkages. We've been speaking about all of these things for many a year. However, I guess now with the reality of COVID, we find ourselves now almost being forced, dragging, kicking, and screaming against our will to do these things that we probably could and should have been doing with a little more vigor before. I like everyone else in Barbados, I want to hear what exactly are the plans going forward. I am not satisfied that I think I heard exactly where it is we want to take the sector, and by extension, the economy of Barbados, because you can't divorce the two. If we accept that we are basically tourism dependent, you have to sort out the tourism picture before you can tell me about other sectors that are connected to tourism. So we need to hear a little more about that. Now, crisis in itself is not new. I mean, I had to deal with the 2008 economic crisis, the global economic crisis, which to that point was the worst the world had seen in 100 years. My predecessor had to deal with the wake of the 9/11 events on 9/11, in 2001. But I suppose this situation is a little more worse. But the fundamentals, we have to focus on the fundamentals. We still need clarity on our investment strategy. We had our hotel room stock up to about 7,000 rooms when I came out of office, and that was an increase from 2008. I've heard talk about wanting to have up to 1 million long stay visitors in Barbados. I don't know where you're going to put the people if you don't have hotel rooms. We hear about hotels that are supposed to be constructed, but we now need to start to see bricks going up in the air. And in fact, to my mind, now that you have, almost no meaningful tourism, this is a good time to deal with some of those elements. And even as you move away from the bricks and mortar, the product offering, the visitor experience, these things that we were talking about coming out of 2008, still relevant today. I mean, I heard Damien touched on it. I mean, the idea of someone coming down here and just, lying down on the sand under a palm tree and taking a dip in the ocean, those days are over. People want to be immersed in the culture and want to enjoy the destination. So we have to hear about that. And of course, markets. Yes, new markets, existing markets, and what we plan to do. There's going to be a tremendous demand for Caribbean vacations coming out of this COVID thing. Are we prepared for it? How are we going to manage it? What are we doing to benefit from it? I am not so sure that I'm hearing any clear picture in that regard. That was, a focus that we did coming out of the last crisis. And hopefully we will see and start to hear something going forward. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much, Richard. Before we get into the meat of the discussion, though, let me first of all welcome all those of you who are joining us on all the social media platforms. You're listening to the Sunday Roast, entitled this evening, Rescue and Tourism. And of course, it is brought to you with the kind compliments of the Democratic Labour Party. Damien, I'm going to start with you, though. For most of 2020, and certainly for the first 4 months of this year, tourism has really fallen flat, put in peril our tourism investments, our hospitality workers, the workers in the ancillary services and in the support services. What is your outlook as of April this year?
Well, I think the outlook remains pretty much the same as it has been for the last couple of months. What we are waiting to hear from the government, and which seems to be the underlying problem, because I think there's a problem with confidence. The attempts to reopen in December led to a shaking of the confidence in their ability to safely reopen the tourism marketplace in Barbados. So we were not certain the people coming in could be brought in safely. We're not certain that when you are here, you could be safe, which led to all of the fallout with programs like the Welcome Stamp program, members wanting to leave. I think the fundamental thing that needs to happen is the administration needs to show how we can comfortably believe that they are the people who can ensure that there's a safe tourism, a return to tourism in Barbados. And given all of the research that has been done over the last year and a half, looking at it, it's pretty clear that we can't expect a V-shaped recovery. So we need to look at the ancillary services that go along with the tourism sector and see what we can boost. So we do need open hotel plans. Hotels need to be in a position to reopen so there's some place for people to stay. As you heard Richard just speak of, there needs to be a product for them to access. What's going to happen? We don't have festivals going on in the same manner right now because the large gatherings of people are a COVID risk. And we're not sure how many more waves we're going to have to contend with. So what are the products you're going to be able to create? What are you going to entice people to come with? Because if we are being honest, there is demand. There is significant pent-up demand in the source markets by the people there to want to get out and get to some place like Barbados. And therefore, if you can create the structure where they can be safe in doing so, that Barbadians can benefit from working in the sector and make money, and then there'll be ancillary services to help tide those Barbadians who may not get their jobs back directly in the sector right away, but over the next 2 years, we can look to build up. And that means because when we spoke to the estimates responses by the current minister, one of the things that we were curious about was the lack of explanation of there being funding for retooling and retraining workers. If you have the multitude of your tourism workers laid off, this is a good point to train them so that they're the best professionals they can be when they go back in. You have people who've been in the tourism sector for 30 plus years who are now on the breadline and trying to struggle to survive. How can their experience be tasked or can be combined with a new set of educational experiences so that they become the management, the leadership to really drive forward the industry. You heard nothing like that from the minister. Well, the Barbados Tourism Product Authority is now defunct, and it was one of the most important parts of what the last administration did to ensure that Barbados remained a viable product. What new products are we going to create? How are we going to get them out so that people can access them? And it becomes necessary because I think it's only as of tomorrow that you can go to a movie, let alone a fete or party. The restrictions create an environment where you, even if it was sun, sea, and sand, you weren't allowed to go to the beach outside of certain hours. So we have to create the product that attracts people. And we know that we're going to get some buy-in because people just have COVID fatigue. They want to get out of their homes. But we need to make sure that our product is ready so that we are adding value and making people want to come back. We have to make sure that we are looking at the consequences with regard to COVID, because I'm still not hearing a policy from the government on one, quarantining long term, what they think is the need, and two, what is going to be the policy to get, because two of the most important source markets for us, which would be the US and the UK, have both had very active vaccination campaigns. So are we going to then target those vaccinated people in the hopes that they can assist us in the management of COVID on the island because they're less risky? Well, all of the information is not in with regard to the transmission, but the assumption is that we have more opportunities to manage the COVID situation with people who've been vaccinated. What are the strategies we're going to use to target them? And that sort of discussion has not been had. And I think it's critical now. I saw earlier this week the government advising the entertainers that they should be the ones creating a policy to submit to government so that they can figure out how you have the parties and how you do the other entertainment acts going forward. I think it's one of those things where we need as a grouping to sit, brainstorm, and pull together a policy, because the entire island is suffering. And we need all heads in there to make sure that when we go forward, we get the best possible policy so that we're not leaving especially smaller providers in the sector out to sea.
Okay, thank you. Madam Party Leader, Damien mentioned the Barbados Tourism Product Authority, the segmentation of the tourism management structure, product offerings, the marketing, the promotion, the sales. Has that really worked though in this COVID environment?
Well, I'm glad you asked about in this COVID environment, because the thinking behind the separation of the two, the marketing and the product, was to allow for there to be a specialization in terms of how we penetrated, how we forced our message into our traditional and then our non-traditional markets. That made sense and really would have saved a lot of the angst and the headache in relation to even the welcome stamp program, which was, let's be frank, that was an excellent idea with very poor execution. And it was very clear that that marketing aspect of the product was missing. And we also see that in the leakages that we are having in terms of personnel and those who have left from the top tier. We've had 5, we spoke of 2, but we really had 5 resignations coming out of tourism at a time when tourism is at a critical point. So to answer your question shortly, it has not worked for this administration, but that is because they have left that thinking behind. And I do believe that the architect of it, Richard, would be best placed to describe the thinking behind it, but certainly the mechanism of it in terms of having a different grouping working on the strategy and the marketing and how it is how we are sold in the market, especially since going forward, sustainability is going to be a key factor in determining tourism. Sun, sea, and sand does not in any way differentiate us from the Spanish coast. It doesn't differentiate us from the Mediterranean. It does not differentiate us from Florida. So when we are going into these markets and we're looking to bring them towards us, we have to find that thing that is us, quintessentially Barbadian, and work with that, especially in an environment like this, where first and foremost, it will be niche markets that come on stream before mass-based tourism. Let's be frank, given the hit that airlift has taken, we expect that the cost of a ticket will increase. So we need to be aware what we're looking at. Another niche market that we left behind was yachting. And to be real, you can't want a better quarantine environment than sailing across the Atlantic for 14 days. So we have, in this current environment, to seriously rethink where we are at, and don't try to reinvent the wheel. Be sufficiently humble enough to recognize that that dichotomy was there for a reason and that it worked. And the constant bleed of our major thinkers and movers and shakers in the tourism environment does not augur well for Barbados.
Richard, I'm going to pose the same question to you, because I know it is under your superintendence as Minister of Tourism that that same structure was put in place, and successfully so too. I'm speaking about, is it relevant? It's still relevant in this environment. You're muted. You're muted.
Yeah, it is still extremely relevant, and to some extent we've come full circle. My understanding is there is an officer with a very tiny team at the marketing body, BTMI, that is responsible for product. That was what we found in 2008 that was wholly ineffective, where you had the Barbados Tourism Authority and you had, I think it was a product integration officer or something like that. And we said, no, we are a mature destination and we need to look at the product issues, and you needed laser focus on some of those elements, the visitor experience, the non-physical aspects of tourism. And that is when we, amended the act and created the Barbados Tourism Product Authority. And that is in no way, in fact, takes away from the importance of marketing. As a matter of fact, BTMI was intended, and that is why it is not covered under a statute. BTMI is actually a company, a government-owned company, and it was to be a laser focus, responsive, to be able to deal with the modern realities of travel and tourism. It's very much internet-based and so on. And BTMI could even enter into arrangements and so on, commercial arrangements in a different way. So it was to get the laser focus on the marketing, and also to highlight the importance of product and product development. And now, of course, it is again reduced to being a subsidiary of the marketing body, which is what we found, and which was not good enough. Marketing tends to overwhelm the big budgets and the, all of the high-flying elements, and the spade work, so to speak, of product development was lagging behind. And that's why we did what we did. And I certainly hope that that even if you want to play the little political game about companies and structures, focus. That is what, certainly in this post-COVID environment, there is a greater need for focus on our tourism product, a serious focus on it, and what we plan to do going forward. I mean, COVID is going to present some very peculiar challenges. We're going to have to operate differently. And I think that, okay, you were offended by the existence of this entity called the Barbados Tourism Product Authority. But what are you doing? Can it just be a desk in a corner of Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. and one or two officers in a cubicle? I don't think so. And I think that certainly needs to be looked at properly going forward.
You've been really had the honor for the 10 years between 2008 and 2018 to be our tourism industry's chief superintendent as minister. We've been hearing a lot of talk recently when there are adverse conditions in our main source markets. We've been hearing falling from the mouths of our tourism main administrators that it's not a big thing really, that tourism will come back and no need really to panic. But what is the state of play really in Barbados, the tourism product that is on offer from Barbados?
What we are offering the world, you mean?
Yes. What is the state of play? What is happening really positively in our tourism offerings?
Barbados is still seen as a very iconic destination, very desirable. There's still demand for what we have to offer. From what I've been told from some senior people in the sector, a lot of the repeat visitors, especially, are anxious to come back. Some of them who would have missed out on their annual winter break are very keen to come next winter. And they are seeing some evidence of some bookings and so on, which would suggest that that we could, we will see a rebound. There's no question about that. The concern I have is that if we're talking about growing the sector, creating more economic opportunity, creating more jobs, we need to have incremental business. That is new people coming, first-time visitors. Damien spoke about events and that type of thing, and you want to get the next generation of travelers, the young people and so on. And if you want to get them now, so you got to have something very compelling to bring them here. And that, of course, dovetails with the earlier discussion about product and so on. But that is what will concern me in terms of having a deliberate strategy, because what you're going to get is that because not only Barbados, everybody, all the destinations, including our competitors in the Indian Ocean, in the Pacific Ocean, they're going to be putting very compelling offers in the marketplace. I don't think that some people are not going to book 5 different vacations and then drop 4 and then just go on one. And I don't want that Barbados is one before they get dropped. So again, it calls for relationships with people in the marketplace, your packagers and your operators, etc. Your people in the markets have to be doing their sales calls and calling up their people, your airline partners, and you have to see what you can do so that you can not only preserve the repeat business that is your bread and butter, especially out of the UK market, but that you can get some new business as well, incremental business that we can start to see it growing. There's a very real opportunity for that. Some of the work I see the CTO has done lately suggests that surveys in North America are showing that the one overseas choice for them to experience in a post-COVID environment is the Caribbean. Now, the Caribbean is very broad. I mean, Dominican Republic, Bahamas, Jamaica, everybody. But Barbados can get a piece of that action. We have a good team in Toronto, good team in New York, and we have to make sure we can get in on some of that business as well too. So there is an opportunity. I'm not going to sit here and say that there's not an opportunity, but I will continue to make the point that you have to come out of this more robust than when you went in. I remember, people accused me of talking foolishness when I used to make the point that, look, coming out of the 2008 crisis, a lot of the policies that we made, whether it was diversifying source markets or whatever, it was with the eye of making sure that the next crisis we better prepared for it. Now, I had a pandemic on. I can predict a pandemic per se, but whatever it is, you have to make sure that you are stronger and more robust the next time around, because something is going to happen. I mean, look at the volcano erupting. I mean, we don't know how things can affect us. Tourism, yes, Steve. We don't control a lot of the factors that will determine whether or not someone is going to choose to come and have a warm weather island vacation. You know, there are things that happen in their neck of the woods that will also factor in. So, but there's definitely opportunity though. And we have to do what we need to do to see that we benefit from it. I have spoken elsewhere about evidence that I've seen to demonstrate to me that other players in the Caribbean and outside the Caribbean are way more serious about this business than we seem to be. You know, that is what I am picking up. The government, a lot of rhetoric, a lot of PR, a lot of promises. You know, demolishing structures. I mean, I need to see a little more action if we're serious about benefiting from what will be some very glaring opportunities going forward.
You mentioned the CTO as an umbrella organization. You think the CTO would have a pivotal role to play on the reemergence of our tourism products through the Caribbean?
It could. I don't see why not. I mean, I know they're in a transition at the moment with, you know, Neil Walters holding on until they get a new SG. The CTO is an organization that I think has done great work, Barbados-based. You know, a lot of the work, especially emerging destinations in the Caribbean, newer ones, they need help with, you know, manpower planning, advice on sustainable tourism. They need even help and guidance and from other more mature players and so on. It's a great organization, and it can certainly do a lot of the developmental work that needs to happen for, you know, especially the emerging destinations, but even some of the more mature ones like Barbados. So yes, certainly I think the regional cooperation and the cross-fertilization of ideas and so on is always an excellent phenomenon, and it should be encouraged. So yes, I think CTO can definitely play a role, and it should be allowed to do so.
Lovely. Damien, we almost have to press the restart button to get our tourism product kicking again. I'm hearing talk of May the 8th being the date for reopening in Barbados. So of course, with new protocols being put in place and all of that. Given the current environment though, what strategic plans should be implemented ready to stabilize and restore the industry to a certain state of normalcy?
Well, as Richard had indicated, I think it's incremental and looking for growth at each step. So for us to stabilize, what we do need to do is to be able to encourage all of the markets he just spoke of, because as he had indicated, I'm hearing as well, there's a lot of pent-up demand in the US market, and to a certain extent, the UK market as well. People wanted to come at the times they wanted to. And you have the interest because the summer season is the period of time when a lot of Barbadian, not expats, but returning nationals basically, and that grouping would be able to come back. Our diaspora would tap into Barbados and come back. So we need to have a set, once the COVID protocols are set, and I'm hoping that when you talk about May the 8th, they will be set for the period for the next 3 months or so, barring some unforeseen disaster. We can only plan and then implement. You want to implement a strategy that says, we are trying to get this number of flights weekly, because I think even out of New York, which was a daily destination for us, you're only getting 4 flights a week currently. That would need to be higher for summer to get the type of travel that you would normally get. Outside of that, the UK would also need to increase flights. And then the activities that that are available in summer need to be back. We were restricted for the longest while what we could do at the beach. We were restricted in where we could gather. Even though some restaurants are reopened, not everybody. There are a number of restaurants that are names in Barbados that have not yet been able to reopen. There need to be activities that once we are meeting the criteria, and I think that has been the part of it as well. I know there's been a lot of castigation of the Barbadian public, but the government needs to set clear guidelines of what it wants Barbadians to do and allow them to follow those things. So if we want to have even the toned down crop over festival, we need to be doing these things. When you're gathering socially, you still need a certain amount of social distancing. You need your mask on still. We're encouraging people to take up the vaccinations and make sure that you are vaccinated so that we get closer and closer to herd immunity. The structures need to be put in place so that the average person can follow them, both the locals, and I think where we fell down last time was the tourists. We had a lot of discussion about tourists doing this and tourists doing that. But part of my concern the last time we tried to reopen was we sold tourists that everything was going to be normal and then wanted to be upset when they came expecting that. That was what the Ministry of Tourism, the Tourism Authority, BTMI had sold to tourists. You're only going to have this short stay in quarantine. When you come out of the short stay in quarantine, you'll be able to do all of this stuff. And then it became an issue that the tourists actually wanted to do what they were promised. So we need to be very clear on what it is we're expecting of everyone. Let that be part of the decision making, and then give them a clear idea of what the new normal will be for tourism here. And I believe it's a lot closer to the old normal. Bajans haven't stopped socializing. Tourists will be able to engage in that. You can go to a rum shop the same way you could before. You can go to a fancy dinner the same way you could before. The availability at the dinners may be less because you have to do more social distancing, which makes the product more desirable, but because fewer people can get it. But there's opportunity once we put in place the structure. And I think that has been lacking. It's a case where we just seem to be hoping for the best, but not planning for the eventualities that we can expect to face, given what the COVID situation has created. So we are looking, my thoughts are that we should continue to look at how we can structure things in such a way that people understand clearly there are some differences, but if you do these things, we can provide you with reliable access to what you want to do.
Let me remind those who are viewing us on our social media platforms that you're listening to the Sunday Roast. In this segment of our roast, we're talking about tourism, entitled Rescuing Tourism, and it is brought to you, of course, with the compliments of the Democratic Labour Party. 9 minutes before 7 o'clock, I just want to switch to you, our party leader. I know that we're formulating plans as we speak, and without letting anything out of the bag. What are your thoughts really for a vibrant tourism sector under a new Democratic Labour Party administration?
Thank you very much. The tourism industry has to be a player amongst other players. So the juxtaposition, or maybe not even a juxtaposition, because we want them to gel well, is that we want to have the tourism industry fostering other industries as well, and having partnerships with other industries, which is something that we had started doing and we need to see more of. And I'm not just speaking in terms of entertainment or in terms of the food product that we distribute, but I'm thinking in terms of a more long-term strategy where we are taking our climate into consideration, and we're thinking about how we can conserve energy through the tourism sector. We're thinking of how we can have Barbadians feel a part of the process, so that this is not an us and them situation. Definitely we need to have employee confidence, and we need to build on that, and those interpersonal relationships that need to be developed. But we need to have a sustainable tourism product. That really is the crux of the matter. One that can weather storms. Yes, this will not be the last crisis. It certainly was not the first crisis, as Richard pointed out, but we need to build a sector that can be cocooned in large measure because we have taken certain steps, we have made certain provisions. We have to remember that tourism remains one of the largest employers in Barbados outside of government. So whenever we are dealing with policy initiatives for tourism, we are in effect dealing with policy initiatives that touch and concern the lives of people. So that is why it is particularly painful to hear that some of the workers from the Hilton and other hotels have yet to be paid their due under severance. It is why it is painful to hear that we have hotel workers who have not worked since March last year, and that we don't seem to have any plan outside of waiting out COVID, which seems to be outlasting us in any event. So what we're looking to build going forward is that resilience in an industry that has the opportunity to branch out, and remembering always that when we are speaking about tourism, we are actually speaking about people, not just our own people here as workers, but those that we invite here. And as Damien said, we have to be mindful then of what the product is once they get here, especially if we are looking, like Richard suggested, at a younger tourist. Then we need to have less sedentary and sedate attractions for them. We need to keep them, because of course our repeat visitors have to be satisfied as well. But here is an opportunity to build out brand new attractions, have entrepreneurial spirit move in that direction, so that we have something to offer that younger visitor to Barbados. And once we have something to offer to different markets, we are better able to weather the storm. It's a pandemic that hit all markets right now, but it could be one that is more structured against a particular market. It could be one that affects, there could be some world crisis that affects pensions, and therefore our long-standing repeat tourists are the ones who are primarily affected and cannot come back. But if we're not able then to pivot, if we're not sufficiently malleable that we can turn in a different direction. For instance, when Richard was the Minister of Tourism, I recall that our traditional markets facing north were in financial troubles that were not affecting South America and Central America in the same way. And he redirected some energies, not that you were leaving out our traditional markets, but redirected some energies towards Suriname, towards Brazil, towards Argentina, towards Panama, because we needed to have, and some of these we had diaspora content and interest in any event that we could build out. So we need to make sure that our tourism product is resilient. That, I think, is the underpinning of anything that we do going forward where tourism is concerned.
Richard, like most industries, tourism will evolve. When you were sitting in the hot seat just 3 short years ago, would tourism be the same as it was 3 years ago? And the same question to you: what should a new Democratic Labour Party administration be looking for in terms of infusing a new tourism sector, a new tourism product, if we were to regain the government in another 2 years, for instance? Well, what would your aim be and your focus be?
No, I definitely, you need to be resilient, you need to be flexible, you need to be responsive. For example, when I first started in 2008, there was no there was no such thing as Airbnb. By the time I left in, 10 years later, that was one of the more talked about things in the accommodation element globally. Even things like TripAdvisor, and I mean, it's very dynamic. Traditional marketing has been supplanted by what goes on in the digital space, and then of course social media. We had to hire a social media manager by the time I was there. That didn't exist in 2008. So yes, you need to be responsive and flexible, and accept the reality that because of our very high rate of repeat visitorship and the fact that the demographic that we attract tends to be on the more mature side, you have to deliberately go about the business of trying to get young people to come here, and yes, there's an opportunity, because if they were coming here as children, maybe they'll come here when they themselves start their families and that sort of thing. But the point is that you have to accept that we have to focus on that, and that calls again for the flexibility and the resilience, and to build it into the sector itself, that you can respond accordingly going forward. So without a doubt, that is what we have to do. Diversifying your source markets, for sure, that's something that we thought about. And on the ground, creating more opportunity for people to participate. And that in itself makes the destination more enticing for people who are coming here, because that's what they want to do. We talk about our brand elements and the friendliness of the people and so on. They want to interface with Barbadians, and you have to provide opportunities for that interface, and in such a way that you can allow people to make a living. So that's really where we are. And one of the areas, again, and this is where we segue into macroeconomic planning, the linkages to other sectors. I don't accept that it is either or. I sometimes hear some interesting calls about moving away from tourism and getting into agriculture. The best friend of the farmer in Barbados is the tourism sector. You have just under 700,000 long stay. Well, that was the record. But and then you have 800,000 plus cruisers, long stay and cruisers. That is 3 or 4 times the population of Barbados as a market for farm produce, for manufactured goods, service providers even. There's a natural market that is provided, and you can have those sectoral linkages. And then I wouldn't even bother to get into the question of services, aviation services in the port, etc. It is a good opportunity. The green, what do you call it? Energy. A lot of the stuff we did. I mean, I think we were just under 30 megawatts being generated from renewable sources in 2018. I'm sure that has grown since then. But all of these opportunities for sectors to benefit from tourism. And I think, again, if COVID doesn't do anything for us, it should leave us with the reality that, okay, there's going to be a bit of a surge and the pent-up demand, but let's leverage it so that we see the sectoral linkages are strengthened, such that you have a more diversified economy, and which is what we want. Nobody wants us to continue relying exclusively on tourism, but at the same time, I don't think anybody really will tell you to throw out the baby with the bathwater either. It calls for some sensible macroeconomic planning, and that for sure has to be centerpiece going forward when you talk about a tourism sector.
I'm certain, though, Richard, that tourism planners and investors in this current environment are certainly reworking some of their plans, relooking some of the investments. Well, shouldn't we, for instance, at the Pomeranian Hotel, be looking at the curriculum that is being offered to revamp our training in some way to adapt to what is going to be the current environment?
Yeah, the tourism master plan spoke about that. It was an entire volume on manpower planning within the context of building tourism going forward. I heard Damien speak to this, and yes, and COVID now puts even an interesting wrinkle on it in terms of going forward. I also think that that we need to also see the potential for Barbadians to go elsewhere in the Caribbean and even further afield to work in tourism. And nothing wrong with that. We export skills. I mean, it is something that we've been doing for a number of years successfully. There are other destinations, as I said, and this is even some of our very close neighbors that are now less mature in the sector, and that's an opportunity. So yes, Steve, I think that, you know, all of the governments, the one that I was a part of, the one that preceded it, and this one have talked about what's going on in the context of the community college, to expand it, to create more opportunities, and to create, you know, coursework that is relevant going forward as well. As I said, the sector is extremely dynamic. It's not static, and you have to constantly be reworking how you train people, etc., to work in the arena. So that is a critical aspect of it for sure, Steve.
What are your thoughts, Damien?
Hi. Well, I think that Richard is spot on. Actually, while I was here listening, because earlier he brought back to mind, I started to smile. I was thinking of a comment a friend of mine from Ireland had made, because when Richard started to talk about how we brand to get younger people in and what's not, and that friend had messaged me to ask if there were any classes online or on YouTube where you could learn to walk up like a Bajan, because they'd been watching some content and they were like, but how do you do this? Is there something that I can pay for to learn to do it? And I was like, I'm not sure. I know you can find some free stuff. There's some tutorials that people do, but it brought up to my mind that you could be doing things, especially where it comes with Barbadian music and food and what's not. Younger people tend to be foodies and travel aficionados and all these sorts of things. And they want that type of content. And given that we are locked in here, but we have all of these talented people in the cultural industries, maybe we can be creating content that is marketing just in the content of itself. Because I know that one of the hardest things to find on YouTube is a reliable video to make cuckoo and flying fish. But if you can do stuff like this, and people get to try out a little bit of Barbados on their own before they get here, it builds up the desire to come as maybe a one-off trip for some people, because if we're being honest, some people can come to Barbados every year, but the majority of people, it's a lifetime type trip. And I remember that experience going to Ireland, being told by a taxi driver, he was so impressed to meet somebody from Barbados in Ireland, because in winter, his dream in driving taxi was that he would save enough money that just before spring, he would be able to come down on a short visit. And this is once every 10 years or so. This is not every year. But if you build that desire for what Barbados has to offer, and you see it a lot with the culture, our music is especially popular once you get it out there. It presents an opportunity where everybody is stuck at home and they're watching everything from Netflix to YouTube to TikTok. Whatever format it is that they're consuming, there's an opportunity for us to create content that raises that desire once the opportunity is available to come here, that those people can come in. So for me, I do see what Richard is saying very clearly, and I want to wholly endorse, because I think it's craziness to put all your eggs in one basket. Instead, we need to be linking, because in my notes here, I had a note. You know, we really want a diverse economy and a stronger tourism sector to be able to replace some of the stuff that we need to import to support the tourism sector. We need to build out the manufacturing, so that one of the cost saving things over the last 10 years for hotels overseas has been the changing of toiletries so that they're more environmentally friendly, but they're also not as expensive. So a lot of the big chains like Marriott have gone away from the little bottles of toiletries and gone to dispensers. They tend to use a lot of very locally based companies to generate the products they put into the dispensers. So you could get Barbadian made shampoo and creams and stuff available. In the next vein, you could also have the agricultural sector providing a lot of the food that you eat, because it was a surprise for me in my regional travels when I saw that in Barbados, you tend to get local produce targeted to the hotels, but like chicken is one of those things. I've been to islands close to Barbados where they're not growing their own chickens, they're importing it. That's an added cost that goes on to the foreign exchange burden that you have to meet. You're putting out money to bring in stuff. So we have all of these opportunities that we can diversify, make tourism stronger, but then also create products that can be exported to other Caribbean islands, can replace stuff that we're using here. And I think this is the opportunity that we have to go in and look and plan this out. It doesn't all have to be done at the same time. It can be staged in, but every time you stage in something more, it becomes friendlier to your economy because you're cutting down your reliance on stuff, on outside products. And it goes back again to the environment, which Richard mentioned. If you're reducing the need for electricity generated by imported fuels, if you're getting because again, with the taxi driver, Barbados is one of the places in the world where you come out and your regular taxi is one of the nicest cars you will get into in your life. You so often get into a Mercedes or a BMW, and it doesn't happen like that in other places. So the kind of experience you can engender when you do that, you have the freedom now to play around with it and say, well, we can be one of the first in the Caribbean to say, we have designated electric cars. So you've cut your carbon footprint in Barbados by using an electric taxi. There's so many opportunities that don't necessarily need us to spend huge amounts of money because there are electric taxis here already. What you would be doing is encouraging and incentivizing the use of them so that people continue to go. I mean, we could get a lot more in the near future. And I believe that once we look at these opportunities holistically, and it is about pulling together, because I would say this of tourism in Barbados. When we grew up as children, we were reinforced tourism is our business. And I think that's how our economy started to work. Entertainers play off of tourism. Farmers play off of tourism. Everybody else is banking on the tourism sector. And once we work together, it doesn't mean that we get rid of tourism, but what we do is we reduce the dependency on tourists alone, but provide a better product for doing it. It then leads to the overall growth of Barbados.
I hope the NCF is listening to this program this afternoon, because certainly they can create a revenue stream for tutorials in the art of walking up. I believe they can create some courses in that. I'm glad also, Damien, that you spoke about the cultural industries. Of course, the Cultural Industries Act was ushered in by the last Democratic Labour Party administration. And I'm hoping that somehow that in our new strategic plan for the Democratic Labour Party, that we'll be mindful that we can incorporate some of the cultural offerings and the cultural fare, not only the gastronomic delights of our cuisine and all of that, but certainly there are features like you talk about our vehicles that we use on a daily basis, our dances, and other features of our national culture could be incorporated into the new strategic plan. Now, we looked at the strategic plan coming from the Democratic Labour Party. What ideas for growth can be incorporated in that overall plan, Damien?
Well, our strategic plan going forward has to now, and that's the unfortunate thing. We can't place blame, but COVID created a situation where a lot of work that was done under Richard was wiped out. We in the 10 years under the DLP, there was so much tremendous development. There was the expanding of routes. There was the development of hotel capacity, which is something that is ongoing. But that a lot of that was worked out. So we are going to have to go back in the strategic plan and look at how do we incentivize that type of development, the build out of the industry. We need to get more resources coming in because you can never tell with this administration, they're never clear. But I see embassies being opened in places that are not necessarily our biggest trading partners. I hope then that part of the logic is that you're going to use them as international transport hubs of some sort into Barbados, even if it is because I heard the minister speak about the importance of moving goods by plane from these places like Dubai and I forget where else. I believe Kenya in Africa and some other places. If you are thinking broadly and looking at these as ways to shorten travel, because for somebody coming now to Barbados, coming to go to Africa from maybe South America, they have the same routings that we do. They're pretty long routings. If you can find ways of making smoother and more efficient travel for at least the Caribbean region through Barbados, that is one thing you could look at in a master plan. But there are other areas where we have to explore as well, in addition to the international transport. You have to look at the tourism ability to generate, because here's the thing. I think what we need to do with tourism is to recognize that it can sell a lot of the product, which is the Barbadian people, not them physically, but what we create. I find that Barbados is a very creative space for such a small country. And therefore, if you can use tourism as a vehicle to get that out there, it is necessary to incorporate that into a longer term plan for it to actually be done. So you're going to need to figure out, how do we get back to having festivals regularly that people can come into? Do we need to change the type of festivals that we're having? We had a reggae festival and other stuff. Crop over was the crux of the soca offering, but are there other points in time where we can be using local soca artists to generate income, but also to get them recognition overseas? What can we do throughout the year? And if we can use the tourism plant and product to create that environment, then you can spin off to the virtual world with a whole bunch of other stuff. And the master plan now going forward needs to then go back and say, well, we had expected by 2024 to be this place. We now need to look at the next 10 to 14 years and say, by this period of time, we need to have, and I think it's stuff that the ministry needs to be saying now. If COVID can be controlled in this calendar year, if that means if we can get the vaccinations widely spread and what's not, how can we increase airlift next year? How can we encourage hotel products to be shovel ready? Because not a tourism related thing, but it's going to be relevant when we try to start rebuilding, and so it needs to be considered in the master plan. We've been hearing the complaints about how difficult it is to set up companies in Barbados. People, I can tell you, I had some paperwork in 2019 that took from 2019 to 2020 to complete. And then as soon as it was ready in 2020, the economy went south and it really was not able to be done in the same way. Then you also have the difficulty with being able to get projects like hotels approved in a manner that investors would find timely. And you have to look at all of these things and make sure that they're thought of now when we have the downtime, so that when an investor has the capital available after the pandemic and is looking for shovel-ready projects, they can go into those quickly and get into the market in Barbados. And then we're going to have to rebuild stuff like, I am just daunted by the thought of rebuilding the cruise industry, because I think that has been more hit by COVID than the rest of tourism. And it's so important to Barbados that we have to find ways that we can encourage it, increase the home porting, increase all the other stuff, things that have been worked on already, but because of the situation that occurred, have been devastated, not through fault of our own, but we still need to do the repairs. So I think the master plan is going to have to be all encompassing and pulling very many of these sectors across society, as opposed to just being I think that the tourism master plan is going to be very strongly linked to the economic master plan for Barbados, period. It is going to be critical. We cannot separate the two at this point.
Party leader, your thoughts?
Carrying on from where Damien has left off, that is precisely the point. The intention is when we speak of fostering other industries and other revenue streams, it is with the intention that there's some linkage, not just with tourism, but across the board. I see large restaurant players pairing with technology startup where there's seed funding given, but there's also some benefit to that restaurant chain because they are receiving then the benefits of the technological input. Similarly with tourism, we need to not just concentrate on tourism. We need to be building out other industries as well, but not to the exclusion of tourism. Matter of fact, it is as Richard said, tourism feeds a lot of these others, and we just need to make sure that we strengthen those bonds, that we ensure that when we are speaking about the restaurant delivery, that we're not only speaking in terms of having an Asian restaurant, but our hotels also offer local fare, and that they offer it from local produce in large measure, that our black belly lamb is the lamb of choice on the plating, that we find all of these different linkages and foster them, that the pairings are important, and it also is a strategic placing of our economy in the event that you do have another shaking of the foundations like we're having right now, which undoubtedly that is what is happening. But it is not the first shaking that the tourism industry has had, and it will not be the last. And that is why that resilience has to be built in, by finding all those ways that we can have the rationalization of costs, that we can have different types of tourists attracted to Barbados. That overall strategy on tourism does not ever stand alone. It has to be part and parcel of an interwoven national strategy, that while for time constraints we speak about them individually, that at some point in time that interconnectivity is also brought home. And maybe every time we speak, we should be pointing out how the tentacles reach into the next subset. And the positioning of Barbados generally, the CTO is a wonderful organization, but at the end of the day, all of the constituent governments look out for themselves. We have had one of our major tourism drivers moved to Grenada. I don't think that is happenstance. That cannot be read as anything other than a loss on our part. And we need then to be making sure that the product that we come up with is sufficiently unique, and as I said before, quintessentially Barbadian, that in the strategic positioning of ourselves in what is a highly competitive environment, even outside of the Caribbean, it's very competitive within the Caribbean. Outside of the Caribbean, we have no, we say God is a Bajan, but we don't have all the sea, sun, and sand that there is in the world. So we have to find all of these other ways of making Barbados special, keeping Barbados front of mind and top of mind for persons who are thinking of vacation, for people who are thinking of even longer term than that. But then, as Damien said, what we are offering, we have to be very clear on it. And this is one of the concerns with the reopening on the 8th of May, that perhaps we still have not articulated with clarity the expectations. The last set of protocols were written and spoke up to the point of the airport. And it very clearly said, you must wear your mask so long as you are in the airport, and stops there. Then we had that rub with the tourists, trying to get them to wear their masks once they were on island and out of quarantine. So we need to be highly specific in relation to the expectations, how they are managed in this short-term environment, and then building out a strategy for tourism going forward post-COVID, or even during COVID, because we do not know how long we will be in this mode. Building out our tourism past the short term, past this summer, we need then to be making sure that our offerings are sufficiently us that people want to be a part of it.
Continuing with you, Madam Party Leader, one of the many stellar achievements of the last administration was the granting of Bridgetown and its garrison as a UNESCO heritage site. I'm not hearing much about it. I don't know if this government, the current administration, doesn't want to touch it because it was achieved by the last administration. Have we fully exploited that granting of the UNESCO heritage site, Bridgetown and its garrison?
No, we have not. And it has several different facets. Anytime you're knocking down buildings in a heritage site, you are looking for problems. Not that you can't repurpose the buildings. The structures could remain the same. When I delivered the Errol Barr Memorial Lecture, I gave examples of old warehouses in different parts of the world, which were turned into 5-star and 4-diamond hotels. From the outside, the structural integrity remained the same, but we in Barbados, we have now demolished 2 sites. The old liquidation center, we were cautioned that the design of those buildings had heritage value, and that was not taken on board. And then, whilst we may not be looking at it in terms of heritage from the time of the garrison, there was heritage in the old National Insurance building in terms of what Barbados was able to achieve in its first strides as an independent country. And the repurposing of buildings is important in a heritage environment. Also, we have to find ways, and this too is a part of any tourism drive, that we find ways to re-energize Bridgetown. It doesn't have to come back in the same form that it was in terms of the business hub of government. But there definitely has to be some attention paid to activity within Bridgetown, so that we have a building out of that same heritage offering. It is not just what was being done before, and that is that we have heritage tours and things of that nature. That is fine, because there is a niche market for heritage tourism in and of itself. But if within the context of that heritage,
I think maybe we've Verla's frame is frozen. Can we do anything about it?
I think we just need to go till she comes
there's
back.
something to do in Bridgetown. We need to have that sort.
All right, let's move on. Well, are you hearing us?
I am hearing you. I hope you're hearing me.
Yeah,
but I
we lost you.
realized that I was getting some feedback.
Yeah, we lost you for a little bit. But
I'm
continue
not
where
sure
you
at what point.
Yes.
Okay, right. Once we can have a marrying of the cultural industries, because I view the cultural industries are not intended to be an extracurricular activity. They're intended to be a vocation. Our practitioners ought to be able to make a living and support a family off of their craft. And that can be married very efficiently and purposefully with heritage tourism. So we need to have a thinking, not just a rethinking, but a thinking about how we market our heritage for Bridgetown. If you look at other examples of UNESCO heritage sites, they make a big deal of it in their tourism offering. And I am not finding that we are doing enough in relation to our heritage tourism in the last 3 years.
Just reminding you, you're listening to the Sunday Roast, brought to you with the kind compliments of the Democratic Labour Party. This evening, we're looking at rescue and tourism. And of course, we have our panel, our leader, Verla de Peiza, Richard Seeley, and Damien Griffith. Richard, many of our source markets have not as yet trended towards herd immunity. Is this going to be a threat to us, to our existing protocols, and to the Barbadians on the whole?
I didn't, Steve, what was the first part of your question?
No, I'm saying that many of our source markets in England, in the UK, that is, in North America, including Canada, a lot of those countries are not trending towards herd immunity.
Oh, man.
Is that going to be a threat to us with our existing protocols, and by extension to Barbadians on the whole?
I would think so. I mean, it's okay to say that, you know, we are making great strides in terms of your herd immunity and so on. I don't think what you're saying is accurate. The UK has actually been doing very good with their vaccination program. And that's our major source market. That's actually a good thing for us. Canada and the US, not to the same extent. But, you know, we obviously want to see normalcy come back as rapidly as possible. But even with the most optimistic view, you're talking the end of 2022, more than likely. We're gonna have to live this life with these protocols and hopefully minimize the question of, you know, having any further waves of this thing. You know, I guess the little mishap that happened between November, December last year that led to, you know, the country, we were actually doing quite well, relatively speaking, not as well as New Zealand was doing, but we were doing good. But things went haywire. But I would hope that, yes, Steve, between the vaccination program and everything else, the advances in treatment as well, the therapy has improved. I mean, the truth is that when it first started, the extreme cases of hospitalization were much greater than they are now. We're going in the right direction, but it's going to take time. And I think that the situation in the US and Canada is one that would worry us a lot more than the UK. The UK seems to be doing a better job. And as I say, that is where we have a natural advantage in terms of getting a few things going. The traditional hotel plants that are empty, getting employment, getting those people who are home back to work, at least some of them, because you may not be at full capacity. It's going to take some time, but we gotta go through this. And as I say, we gotta be realistic. I don't see normalcy till, you know, deep into next year. That's I mean, in terms of return to life as we knew it before COVID type of thing.
We've had some recent loss of some key players in our tourism sector. You think this would anyway discommode or derail what we are doing in the tourism industry?
look, I am. I've resisted speaking on this issue publicly. I'm going to make some very general comments. I mean, I was minister for 10 years and I saw people come and I saw people go. That's a natural part of life. Tourism, you know, a lot of young people tend to be in management positions, and young people are going to look for career opportunities. They're going to look for them near, they're going to look for them further afield, they're going to look for them in other sectors. That's a fact of life. And I certainly wish everyone who was chosen to move on all the very, very best. But I must confess that in a short period of time, when you see so many departures, at a time like this, you know, based on what I would have said earlier, I have very strong views on the need to think, the need to strategize, the need to plan, the importance of building relationships. I can tell you from my experience that relationships with the trade, those don't necessarily come easy. And you know, we've had a situation where your chief executive officer gone, your European director gone, your cruise director gone, your director of global markets gone, your chief advisor at the ministry also gone, and the chairman, not an executive position, chairman gone as well. You know, a lot of people going. And it makes you wonder if there isn't, you know, more in the mortar than the pestle type of thing. And I'm not in any way knocking anyone from pursuing what they define to be in their interests. I note that, you know, Mr. Billy Griffith in October 2019, he gave 3 months notice. And for whatever reason, they couldn't find anybody in the 3 months. We've gone now into 2021. I heard the Prime Minister say something about headhunting, but then I understand there's an ad out for a chief executive officer for Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. So I don't know what they're doing, if they're advertising or headhunting. That kind of haphazard approach to a key position like that at a time like this doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. It is my certain knowledge that the board of directors of Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. actually selected an officer from within to be the CEO. And for whatever reason, the Prime Minister vetoed and said, no, didn't want that particular person. And that's unfortunate, because one of the things that we did is that recognizing the traditional approach of bringing in top people all the time and pounding the head of the officers at what was then the Barbados Tourism Authority, that of course became BTMI. You don't see a career path within the organization. You know, when we made the restructuring and we put the head in our US market, the head in our Canada market, the head in our Canadian market, our three key markets, we saw the three of them, one, two, or all three of them would be future CEOs, quite likely. You know, and that was the thinking in terms of trying to create career paths. So then the younger people coming up in the organization wouldn't be so disheartened to see, oh, you ought to bring in a high flyer from this place or that place all the time. And of course, for whatever reason, it doesn't seem as though that is the case. But the apparent exit of so much talent in such a short period of time would suggest a cause for concern, because we know this is the time now you need people to be dropping anchor. That is the ideal situation. But please, I'm not in any way going to suggest that a young professional should not seek career opportunities wherever they are. And tourism naturally will probably have a greater level of itineracy than maybe other professions. So we have to accept it. But I note it, and I don't think that so much in such a short space of time is good for us.
Bartolini, you want to weigh in on this subject?
I think Richard put it very well. I spoke earlier of 5, he named 6. So there's still one other that I didn't mention, but that really is the crux of the matter, that in a critical period such as we are in, the leakages of our brain power at this point in time speaks to some turmoil that we are not being told of. And I think that as the taxpayers, we deserve to know what that issue is. We need to be told. We were given to expect transparency and communication, and we are calling for it now. What really is going on in our tourism industry at the top? At the top, what is that factor that is causing this process? It's not even a process of attrition, because a process of attrition happens over a lengthy period of time. This is a rock fall. We're seeing the shearing off of the cliff. We need to understand and be taken into the confidence of this.
I think we're having some problems there with
He's one whose breadth of contacts and knowledge means a sore loss to Barbados. I can speak to a second one whose immersion in the study and the practicality of tourism means that her loss also is a sore one for Barbados. And then you put all of them together. It is not just one now and one another time, but like dominoes falling in quick succession. We deserve to be told what is happening in tourism, and not just what is happening, but what is actively being done to redress the situation.
Damien, let's get back a little bit to the vaccinations, the protocols, and the procedures that that we are adopting here in Barbados. Do you think that vaccinations will be an imperative for travel in the future?
I think it has started already. I beg your pardon, that was for Damien?
Yes, for Damien, yes.
I beg your pardon.
Yes, I wasn't sure either, because I thought I heard Damien. What I will say is, I don't think that the US is going to make vaccination necessary for travel. I do believe, however, that Barbados can create a strategy where we encourage vaccinated people to come here. I think once the US is saying no, they don't think it's necessary, probably many other people in the world will do it, will say as well, we want that business, so we won't make it an imperative. But I think that we as countries should encourage people coming in, at least for this year, to see if it is more beneficial to get them in here. I think Richard's point about the proliferation of vaccination in the UK, because I think both the UK and the US are somewhere around, I think the UK is higher, they're at 40%, and the US is like at 30%. But they both intend to have the majority of their vaccinations, or somewhere close to 70% at least, by the end of summer. Because I think getting to the end, the willingness to take it is what is going to be the problem. People don't want to take the vaccine, and you can't necessarily force them. But given that sort of proliferation in source markets, at least by winter, we could possibly be looking at over 70% coverage in those two. Canada has been lagging, and it's worrying. Canada, being a country that has such prolific public health care is surprisingly slower than everybody would expect from their competency behind it. So that would be it. And then the other markets that are also concerning are other Caribbean markets, because the other countries in the Caribbean who would come into Barbados for entertainment purposes and for vacation and what's not, they're a bit slow. But if we have to base a strategy on the UK and the US and then let everybody else fall in line behind them, it's possible. And I think that what I expect to happen, and because you especially hear it about young people, people who are hesitant to get the vaccine actually are more willing to consider it if it would make it easier for them to do something like travel. So I think that the vaccine hesitancy is something that with some programming we can get over, and therefore I think it's something that we can possibly work with. But I'm actually optimistic about the US and the UK. The two of them have been doing exceptionally well given all of the vaccine skeptics out there and what's not, and even with little hiccups like what happened with the Johnson and Johnson vaccine and stuff like that. So once people are willing, I think we will be pretty okay. I do think we can have a large number of vaccinated people being the ones who come in.
Yeah, are you really comfortable with the recently introduce new protocols?
I believe that Barbados has been erring on the side of trying to have the least invasive protocols they can have. I don't know. I keep hearing from the official sources we're doing it based on science. I note the fact that while we are saying that Barbados doesn't have that needs to distinguish itself from the other sea and sand destinations, it was a clear divide between hemispheres. People in Asia have been sticking religiously to 14 days. We have tried every sort of combination in between there. I think that 7 days is a little bit better than the 3. I don't know if it's infallible, which is my concern. I think we are hoping for the best in that situation rather than having a medical certainty. Given that the amount of people traveling is lower, I don't think it will be tested until airlift starts to pick back up again. The result of, I mean, quite frankly, I'm not even, Canada had cut off their airlift practically. Most people could not travel when it came to Canada. You have UK and US airlift, but it is so reduced that it primarily goes to people who are Barbadians or diaspora. And so we will have to wait till we see the influx of people again to test the protocols. But for me, I think it is a medium. Whether it's a happy medium, I'm not sure. But we are hoping, I guess that was the intention, to hope that it could be enough that we could get the tourists in. But realistically, because I have this figure in my head, the OECD had put out a statement saying, and this is worldwide, well, it's focused on on European countries, but looking with worldwide consequences, that short stay tourism was going to be cut by 72%. And that looks at countries where you can do internal tourism to much greater numbers than you can do in Barbados. It's very difficult for Barbadians to make up hotel capacity by staycations. They help in like down periods, but where hotels make their money is in winter season. So if you know that for the next year, it's not anticipated that you can get the short stay tourists, people who can come for 2 or 3 nights or less than a week, then it really does not help your rebounding to have to go through and try to get that market. You need to find ways to encourage people who can be here for longer. And in summer, we were accustomed to getting diaspora returning for longer chunks, Caribbean people coming in for longer chunks, and that contributing to things like crop over, but just general summer activities as well, because crop over was the big point of the summer. but there was a lot of other stuff that went on there too as well, and was fostered by people coming in. So if you can get people who can come in long term to start, it reduces the amount of risk that you are taking, because they can do the quarantining. You can have them interacting, and then with the proper protocols, they won't be getting the virus here, so they will be fine. So it is a matter of trying to frame it in such a way that you get the best people, the best environment for the people who want to come in.
Richard, since the government change in 2018, we've heard from the current administration about hotel investment on the waterfront and Bay Street. We've heard on the West Coast, we've heard on the South Coast. We've heard about developments from north to south, from Bathsheba to Bridgetown. Is this the kind of environment really that you think hotel investors would be interested in? And what really is the future of hotel investment in the short, medium, and long term in Barbados, taking into consideration the current environment?
Well, Steve, you're right. We've been hearing everything. The Americans would say from soup to nuts. I mean, you're just hearing everything. You know, every course. Me, I don't want to tell you about that. I think it's something that needs to be accorded some priority. It was an area of deliberate focus of our government, and it needs attention, not idle chatter. Happy to hear the Sam Lord's Castle project apparently is back on stream. I mean, that's a great project. Never understood why they halted it in the first place. I mean, they will never get a loan from any institution like that one we negotiated with the Exim Bank out of China. That 2% interest rate, I think it was. I mean, it ain't gonna happen. Certainly not now. Well, the investment grade gone. So, you know, we all know about the Hyatt. I mean, I know they're struggling to get it going. My hotel was too big. It was too tall. They make it taller and double the size of it. But I hope that the ambassador to CARICOM isn't giving them any trouble. He gave us some trouble. I would love to see it. That is an important catalyst for other properties to develop in that general area. And we certainly had master planned it. You can check the Barbados Physical Development Plan in such a way that we don't repeat the mistakes of the West Coast with green spaces and opportunities for Barbadians to enjoy that wonderful beach as well. So I hope to see that one come on stream, and all of the others. But what is important is not only bringing in a big international chain like Sandals, but the amendments we made to the Tourism Development Act, so that domestic properties, you know, ones that have been the bedrock of our industry over the years, that they can have an ease in their inputs. You know, I remember the BHTA talking about 44 hotels in Barbados renovating and retrofitting after we had put that concession in place. And that's what it's about, you know. I don't know if anybody renovating or retrofitting now, because what this government, of course, did was to soak the sector with taxes, the room tax, the room levy, and everything else. I mean, we did not do that. We said tax the outputs, not the inputs, because I already spoke earlier about having to maintain a level of global competitiveness. I hope you understand, when somebody's sitting down in California and thinking about Barbados, the alternative is not Grenada or St. Lucia. The alternative is Mexico and Hawaii. Somebody in England is looking at the Maldives and Mauritius. You know, it's a global thing we're competing against. So you have to try to make yourself globally competitive. It is a little unfortunate that a lot of games were played with respect to the concession regime that we pursued. I think that the government needs to eat some humble pie and relook that and get the projects going. We need it. We need the construction jobs now, and we need the hotel plant, the hotel room capacity down the road. And, you know, we need to get these things going. You know, why should I be hearing from, you know, from media sources, the new chairman of Sandals Resorts International, Mr. Adam Stewart, announcing 3 hotels in Jamaica breaking ground.
That's
We
right.
got Sandals Beaches there, begging for some investment and to create all sorts of opportunities, for the north of the island and Barbados in particular. But I think the government and the team at BTI are very capable of it. I mean, I have a lot of time for Mr. Stuart Lane and what he can do. I mean, we worked over time to get the hotel projects going that we started, but nothing happened since 2018. Every single one of those projects had its genesis under the last government. They have done nothing new by way of investment. All they have done is knock down structures and chase away people. They haven't done anything. We haven't seen anything, and it is time. And don't tell me about the pandemic, because in other parts of the Caribbean, bricks going up in the air. They're building, they're getting ready. And what are we doing? Making excuses and keeping press conferences every night talking about how wonderful and great they are doing what they're doing. And we want some action. The hotel workers that are home want action. The construction sector. I mean, when there's a building boom in Barbados, it is a different place economically in terms of what happens. Bridgetown is different. We got to get these projects going. We got a few going. There were a few more we should have got going. We got criticized for not being able to implement. And we are now going into the 4th year of this government. And what do they have to show? Again, I understand the COVID affecting travel, but I think that we should see way more investment, foreign investment, domestic investment, and all this investor confidence we keep hearing about. But we are now going into the 4th year, and it hasn't got into 2nd gear yet. So we really need to see some of that going for the sector going forward. As I said earlier, there were 7,000 rooms in 2018, just about. And you know what? There are 7,000 rooms now in 2021, going into 2022. And that's not very flattering, and it doesn't speak to the investor confidence that we were told that was a wash. It needs to start happening. Country needs it for sure.
Thank you so much. We have just about 4 minutes before the end of the program. Just want to hear some final thoughts from you, starting first with Damien.
Okay. Well, I would like to leave the audience with the concept that we are able to do a lot with tourism. The opportunity is there in spite of the COVID pandemic. What we have to do now is to really implement the steps and create the plan and execute that plan. I think the time for talking so much is over. What we need to do is have the consultation, create the plans, and implement. We seem to have an implementation deficit with the current administration, and that is concerning. We seem to have a failure to understand the changes that are necessary to attract new and younger tourists, not to usurp the returning visitors, but to continue to build out the people that we are going to be able to work with. And it is as simple as plan, implement, and reap the rewards. Yet they seem to find it very, very difficult to do that.
Good. Richard, your thoughts? You're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Just very, very briefly, Steve. I heard this government make reference to the IDB National Tourism Plan, US $20 million. That was negotiated in 2014 by the last government. That's not anything new. It had three components: cultural heritage. We were trying to leverage on what you and the party leader were talking about earlier, our UNESCO inscription, digital marketing, and supporting airlift. For some reason, Minister of Finance and Prime Minister said take out the airlift one, but they have, it was the first time the IDB country program included tourism. Barbados created history, and that was the last government. And now it's finally coming to fruition. They're making it sound like if they did it, they didn't do it. So I just thought I would give, that's just a little housekeeping note. As far as my final and very brief comment, I wait with bated breath. I don't want to be like Bob Marley waiting in vain, but the truth is I want to hear the recovery plan. And of course, I want to hear the plan going forward as well. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. Recovery from COVID, as well as the plan going forward to building the resilience the party leader talked about to make our industry more robust. The two can work hand in hand. And like all of Barbados, I wait to hear and I wait to see as well some of the real things happening. I think we've, as Damien correctly said, we've had enough talk. It's time for some action. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Richard. Madam Party Leader.
Thank you very much, Steve. I want Barbados to view COVID differently. COVID has given us a period where we can make fundamental changes. We can make disruptive changes. We have been given the opportunity to do the things that we thought about before, that we didn't have the courage to do before, that we didn't even think were necessary before. But this environment is not one for waiting to see what will happen. This is definitely not an environment for waiting for things to go back to how they were before, because they definitely will not be how they were before. But this is the time and the period for forward thinking, for pushing out new ideas, for supporting them because they will be fledgling. That is the sort of planning and policy initiative that we would be looking for from this present administration. Unlike Richard, I should say, I will not hold my breath, because breath is the essence of life, and I don't wish to die whilst waiting. But what we do not see coming out of this administration is any vision, any projection. We need to be getting that sort of direction, and most definitely we need to be given answers about what really is the turmoil going on in the Ministry of Tourism and what the government intends to do to fix it.
Thank you so much. Well, let me express our gratitude to all of you who took the time to be with us this evening for Sunday Roast, compliments of the Democratic Labour Party. Today, we examine tourism under the theme Rescuing Tourism. We hope the discussion was educational, engaging, and informative, and it is our intention to illuminate these many issues and make them clear for your understanding and for your edification. On behalf of the panel, Verla de Peiza, Damien Griffith, and Richard Seeley, I'm Steve Blackett, your moderator, wishing you a very good night.